Wyoming's national forests, which make up a big percentage of the total land area of the state, afford some of the finest trout fishing in the country. In these national forests, large sections have been set aside, which are called wilderness areas or primitive areas. These mountain and lake sections are preserved in their natural wild state. No roads cross them, no buildings will ever be erected, and no wheel driven by a motor will ever turn within their boundaries. The total acreage of Wyoming's 8 such areas is about 2,300,000 acres, or 1/6 of the country's total 14 million acres of wilderness. 5 of the 8 wilderness areas are in the Shoshone National Forest. The other 3 are located one each in the Bighorns, the Teton, and the Bridger National Forest. In July, I invited a group of friends to join me on a trip into this fabulous Bridger Wilderness Preserve, which is located in the Wind River Range and comprises an area about 80 miles long and 20 miles wide. Let's take a look at some of that country and some of the golden trout we caught, shall we? The Mary Failer Ranch, located at the base of the mountains about 10 miles east of Pinedale, Wyoming, was the point of rendezvous, and the party began to arrive one by one early that morning in July. Harold and Bonnie had driven straight through from Kansas City, arriving just in time to throw their gear on the horses and catch the first bunch out. The ranch lady, who was supplying the pack string for our trip, chatted with Bill about the fishing prospects. Everyone was enthusiastic and eager to get on the trail. Last-minute instructions were given, horses were selected to fit the best, and we were off in the search of the fighting golden trout. A couple of us stayed behind with the head wrangler and the ladies to make sure all gear was securely tied on the pack horses. The doctor had his medicines and bandages for any cuts or bruises which might develop, and of course to recheck the cameras and film supplies. We were interested in getting some good pictures as well as catching some fish. With a mixed party like this, I'm sure we had enough gear, food, fishing equipment, and the like to stay a month, as was very evident when we discovered we had 2 pack horses loaded for every 3 individuals making the trip. The wrangler shook his head but cheerfully jockeyed the pack string onto the trail. Anyway, we were well prepared to spend a week, a long ways from the nearest telephone or modern convenience. It wasn't long until we were over the foothills to the entrance of the wilderness area. These wilderness areas are defined as areas in which primitive conditions of environment are preserved for the use and enjoyment of those to whom the wilderness means many things and yields experiences which are unattainable elsewhere. The first 5 miles of the trip was behind us, and we were now looking forward to some of the scenery which is described as unattainable elsewhere. The high mountain air and soft sunshine filtered through the trees seemed to have a livening effect, making one feel like a kid again. At the first river crossing, the group ahead waited for the guide to lead the way, so we were all caught up together at this point. The 2 Texans wanted to get their fish rods out and catch a few of the beauties for the next meal, but the guide informed them we had 10 miles yet to go and the fishing was better further along the trail. Truly, we were now on top of the world. The trail led us along many lakes and rushing streams. Glimpses of the high peaks in the background gave us a preview of our setting to be for the next 6 days. No one was in a hurry now, as the breathtaking beauty of the country, which is seen only by a few dozen people each year, passed before our eyes. Camera shutters were constantly clicking, and all suddenly realized that not enough film had been brought along. Shouts and waving of cowboy hats indicated that camp was in sight. The 15-mile ride up the mountain through nature's wonderland in Wyoming was behind us. It's now every man for himself to select a spot to bunk and get settled. Early afternoon clouds herald the possibility of a mountain shower by evening, spurring Carter and King to ditch their tents first to ensure a dry bed for the night. At 10,200 feet elevation, where this camp is located, clouds can form in a few minutes and disappear just as rapidly. A large snowbank just back of the trees a ways served as an excellent refrigerator for perishable foods, and a small stream quietly running through our camp provided pure water for all purposes, a little chilly for bathing though. Some of the equipment, and especially the fish rods, were still coming up the trail with part of the group who had straggled while taking pictures. Fishing prospect was a talk around camp, now that the tents were secured and the bunks spread out in readiness. Anxious eyes glanced back down the trail, expecting arrival of the others at any minute. After they finally arrived, a few of the hardy fishermen unlimbered their equipment and picked up some nice brookies on the stream just below. But when the cook sang out, "Come and get it," you can be sure they came a-running. It wasn't long before all was quiet after supper, the still mountains claiming weary travelers. The next morning, after an early breakfast of flapjacks, bacon, and eggs, everybody was up and at 'em, ready to catch some of those goldens which lie in the lakes just ahead. Big Jim, the guide, leads the way for the first party over the little ridge to the upper end of Cook's Lake. The others head down the cut below camp toward the outlet between the lakes. Fly rods and spin rod equipment were set up before we left, lunches packed and tucked inside of shirts. Water supply is handy and the many little streams coming into the lake from above. The two couples, plus Bill and Doc, were cheerful as Jim pointed out the many different varieties of wild flowers just beginning to poke their heads through the pine needles or out from under the snowbanks. As we came over the ridge, we caught our first glimpse of the setting for the upper lake. The season up here is pretty short, about 2 months at the most, from early July through Labor Day usually, depending on the snows. Bud started the snow flying and all were soon mixed into the game. Mountains, lakes, and rivers. This range is full of them. Over 1,000 lakes here. Some never have a fly or lure cast on their surface from year to year. Many of them, too, are within easy walking distance from where the wilderness area begins. The boys naturally were eager to land the first fish. The lake was so clear and the surface so quiet, we were a little doubtful of the results. But no, Big Jim had one on after the second cast. The big rocks and the deep water shielded the fishermen from view, and all went well. Is it a brookie, a rainbow, or one of the beautiful goldens which we came after? Jim knew what it was after the first run. Typical of most mountain sportsmen, he doesn't carry a net, so he works him in close, completely worn out where he can reach down and pick him up. We gathered around to take a look at the unusual markings on this very unusual trout. Shaped like a rainbow, about the same markings, but a lot of red and gold underneath. Truly a beauty. Jim thinks so too, and is proud. Bill, Bud, and Doc were quickly back to their pick spots, spinning their small lures way out into the quiet water after another of those hidden beauties. Bill was the first to connect, and it's a fighter too. Boy, look at that light rod bend. The fish are rather soft-mouthed, requiring pretty careful play in order to land them, especially while standing on a rock without a net. That's number 2. Now who's next? Of course, one of the ladies. After riding over the top of the world on horseback for 6 hours, you might know she'd be a good fisherman. This lake was planted with goldens back in about 1935 by one of our mountain men. He carried the small fish in a can on his back, stopping at every stream crossing to revive the fish with fresh water. For a long time, the golden was the only fish in here. But during the past few years, the fighting rainbow and the hardy brooks have worked their way upstream from lakes below. And a few of those species are now caught here also. The brooks are good surface fighters, and that is just what Bonnie has hooked. She's a little disappointed that it isn't a golden, but the next one probably will be. Isn't it a dandy? Fat and sleek. They sure carry a lot of weight for their length. About 2 pounds on this one. Oops, careful. Doc is next on the list, and he handles the golden gingerly. It's a little hard to watch the fish with those beautiful mountains in the background. The fish are really acting on cue now. Harold says, "All right, Doc, catch me a fish," and Doc complies. Not bad, huh? Shadows are beginning to lengthen now, so Bud and Betty take to the rubber raft to see what is out in the center of the lake. They're running good size, taking almost any lure. Bud hooks into the best one yet. It rolls and twists, trying to throw the lure. From this lake comes the world's record golden, 11 pounds, 4 ounces. We've seen a few of those really big ones scurry away from some of the big rocks as we approach with the raft, but so far none have been interested in our lures. Betty's first catch is a little brookie. Looks rather small beside that 3-pound golden, doesn't it? They're all over the place, out in the center or close to shore. The water looks shallow here, showing the rocks in the bottom. But if you tried to step out of the boat and wade to shore, you'd go plunk in 7 or 8 feet of water. Had enough of the boating, so we drop her off at the inlet and then row across to the outlet to pick up King. He has real sport, catching all sizes and descriptions. The most popular spot seems to be the inlet, where the stream comes rushing in from Wall Lake Glacier another 1,000 or so feet above. Camera to Bonnie, so he can get into the act. Fish are really hitting now that evening is drawing near. Nearly every cast produces a beautiful golden. Our modern mountain man, who planted the fish originally over 20 years ago, hooks onto a dandy and comes through the line to show on the camera. That's a couple of nice ones the girls have. Looks pretty simple to pick them up off the ground too, doesn't it? Let's take a look back at just how they caught and landed them. One of those fast afternoon mountain showers had come up, but we were prepared, and it didn't seem to slow the fish up a bit. Betty and Bobby hook onto those fish quite a ways out where the ripple breaks at the end of the inlet. After getting them out of the fast water into the clear lake water at the side, we point the camera that way and are real pleased to catch the underwater action. Taking no chances again, they drag them side by side up on the bank. The top one is rainbow, the lower one a golden. The golden much brighter with a lot of gold and red. Looks like we already have plenty for the next 2 or 3 meals. Catch size seems to be running from about a pound to 4 pounds each. How's that for a creel of rare goldens? The quick shower is over as abruptly as it started. The sun accommodates us for this contented shot of the group at the inlet. A good sportsman always cleans his fish, preparing them completely for the pan before taking them into camp. Here's how easily trout are prepared. Zip, zip, wash him off and the job is done. Pink meat like a salmon, but I can assure you that the taste is entirely different, which reminds us it's supper time. The cleaned fish are rushed back to camp where Mrs. Mitchell, our camp cook, is preparing the meal in true mountain style. Inch-thick iron Dutch ovens covered with red-hot coals. Talk of the big ones which got away and how we'd get them tomorrow, run fast and furious in camp. As tackle was put away for the night, we washed up for supper. The Texans, King and Carter, decided to have one last try that evening for some of those big ones they'd seen earlier at the outlet between Upper and Lower Cook's Lakes. Shadows cooperated, but the big ones were still not ready to bite. Those 2 men were the camp champs, catching a few which run just over 4 pounds, vowing they'd come back another year and hook into some of those lunkers. The boys had filled out the limit for the bunch with that last fish, so their day was complete. Charlie, the fish and game warden, who had ridden up from Pinedale during the afternoon, just arrived. So he came down to see how they were doing and informed them that the food wouldn't stay hot in the old Dutch cookers forever. Jim strung the catch between 2 pine trees on a little knoll at the edge of camp, marking the close of a day's golden trout fishing high in the Bridger Wilderness area in Wyoming. Spin fishing, which we were doing mostly on this trip, is making a lot of good fishermen out of fellows who couldn't master the art of fly fishing. Those goldens do rise to flies, however, and we picked up many nice ones in the evenings along the coves and on the outlets. It's just that picture taking wasn't too good during those times. Remember, most of Wyoming's 20,000 miles of trout streams and over 5,000 lakes are open to fishing from May to November. The welcome mat is always out. Pack your gear and come on out. We've got more fish than we know what to do with. So long.